I might get interrupted here in a second. 1 second.
Do you hear little footprints outside the door?
Mm-hmm. I'm going to be done in less than 5 minutes. Yep. I'm going to be done in less than 5 minutes. I'll be down. Can't believe that worked. So
Hello, makers. Welcome to Making Conversation, a podcast where we chat all about making, the app and the act. I'm Jen, head of marketing for Making. My pronouns are she, her, and my Making app username is KnitPearl. I'm back with Ashley. Y'all loved that last episode that we did together, so we figured we'd do another one.
I think that we always have a lot to talk about, so there's not really any lack of finding things. So we talk a lot about storytelling at Making. We talk about it in theory, we talk about it in writing, and we talk about it on the podcast. And I mentioned in our last episode that one of the reasons, actually like the main reason why I started Woolful originally, which was this podcast almost 10 years ago, was because I love stories. I love hearing people's stories. I think that you just learn so much from stories. And so instead of us getting on here and like talking about what product we're building and just focusing only on that, which is important, like we'll talk about that. I think even more important than that is to tell some stories, because this is what I would want to listen to. So I want to start by, diving a little deeper into some of the things that you and I have talked about on either your interview that we did like over a year ago or this year. I don't remember.
Do you want to hear something really cool that has to do with podcast and timing? We were at Barcelona Knits. I was having dinner with the La Bien Amy team. And we were talking about how we were going to do the Making Conversation podcast live at Barcelona Knits. Amy was going to do it with me. We were kind of talking about what we were going to discuss. And Julia says, wow, that's really interesting, because last time we were at Barcelona Knits is when you all released the podcast with Ashley talking to Amy. And I was like, the universe does it again.
I love that.
What is time? Also coincidences.
Yeah, we have a lot to talk about today. We're going to dive into community. I think that's kind of like the overarching theme of today. And it'll take some different kind of segues here and there, but we also have some questions at the end that we'll answer from our audience that have asked that actually go really well with community. So I love that we didn't even share like what we were kind of talking about, and the questions kind of fit right into that. So we're going to start out by talking about our own story, each of us. You and I, we shared a little bit about our origin story of meeting and starting to work together. But you and I have both been in tech for a long time, and we're both women, and we both have unique experiences. And there's a lot of stories, and stories are really interesting. And every time, I'm in a group of women or anyone really, and we're kind of sharing our experiences from places we've worked or things that we've worked on, or kind of just experiences that have come out of that, I always find that I'm not alone. And I think that that is one of the most powerful parts of community, is feeling that you're seen. And you'll hear that theme come up a lot. Like sometimes I feel like I'm repeating the same things over and over again, but it is important to kind of hammer that idea home, which is community is about being seen. It's being a part of something. It's having belonging. And I wrote an email for Making a few weeks ago that was all about connection. And connection is the core of community. And so in essence, we'll be talking about, connection and community. So what I want to start out by doing is kind of opening up with our stories of like how we each found ourselves in tech. And I want you to go first. Tell us that story.
What you just said about, I feel like I've, said this 100 times, or I feel like I've said this and repeated myself a bunch. That's what I feel like right now. But also I need to understand that like not everybody sees every single piece of content that is connected to my story. When I first moved to Seattle, I thought I was going to go to cosmetology school because, you know, in my late teens and early 20s, when I lived in Phoenix, I lived in a house filled with punk rock kids and indie kids. And I was the stylist. I was cutting and coloring everyone's hair. How did they, apparently I have some sort of talent, though. I don't know, that maybe that's debatable. Maybe I was just the brave one. But I moved to Seattle and I realized, you know, I don't know what I want to do. And, you know, when it came to college, I thought that I had wanted to be a high school theater teacher and realized that I had completely burned myself out by the time that freshman year rolled around by trying to get scholarships to get to college, and stopped going to college after the first semester because I realized I didn't want to do what I thought I wanted to do. And going back to the scholarship part, we didn't have just money to throw around for me to just go to college willy-nilly without a plan or a goal. So I decided to kind of wait until I figured it out, and time just went by, and finally I just was like, okay, well, I think I'm going to go to cosmetology school because that was so much fun for me. And it's like, I can be creative. And I knew from working in salons and spas as like front desk people, I knew the community and connection that you get through that, right? You have these intimate moments with everyone that sits in your chair, and then you can also be super creative and help them like feel their best, right? Or at least that's the goal. I was working at a salon and spa in downtown Seattle as the front desk person. That's like a whole other story, which I don't know if I'll ever tell that on the podcast because the owner was a hot mess, cloaked in a Mormon man. And so that went downhill really fast. Anyways, as I was trying to find a new job to get out of that wild, wild nightmare, I found the Hotel Max, which was not too far from where I was already working. And they were a boutique hotel that at the time looked like grandma came in and decorated, and it was called the Vance Hotel. But this group of hotels called Provenance had taken it over, and they were in like process of remodeling, and they were looking for a front desk person. The theme was art, right? So they partnered with a lot of artists and paintings everywhere, and the fifth floor ended up being dedicated to local music with photography on the doors. You had your Mudhoney door and you had your Nirvana door and all this. So I felt like I fit right into this space once it was done with the renovation. And I had a general manager at that hotel who really saw a lot of potential in me. I ended up being the entertainment sales manager. So I would book bands into the hotel when they were touring, which ended up being super fun because I got to get a lot of like tickets to see shows and stuff like that. I got to meet some very cool people. Imogen Heap is really tall. If you've ever wondered, very tall. Anyways, the president of the company came to me, Bashar. Again, another amazing person who like saw potential in me. He said, so we're going to try this social media thing, and you're creative. You're the creative one here. So I want you to try it. What do you think about trying that out? What do you think about starting that? And at this time it was just for Hotel Max. And, personally, I did not have Facebook. I still only had MySpace because Facebook was still kind of like for schools. And obviously, like I just said, like I dropped out of college, so I didn't have that connection to like any college to be on Facebook. So I was like MySpace forever, top 8, put my song, my emo song at the top of the page. Anyways, so I was like, yeah, I'll do it because I've realized this. One of my superpowers is if somebody asks me to do something and I don't know how to do it, I will just do it and I will figure it out. And it may or may not be like really good, but it's typically good enough / really good, depending on what it was. So I just jumped in. I made the hotel a Twitter account and I made a Facebook page. Instagram was not a thing yet. And I just went for it. And my whole goal with it was to just be a welcoming human on the internet. We saw that a lot more back in that time. back in the day. And I talked about what was happening in Seattle and things happening at the hotel and like the art in the hotel. And I would search for people who were tweeting like, we're headed to Seattle in the summer. Where should we stay? Or we're headed to Seattle. Do you have any tips? And I would reach out to them with a discount code. And when those people would check in, I would personally bring like water or wine or whatever it was that we were giving out as like a VIP thing up to their room. And it was just like this very cool community experience that was not only felt within the guests who were coming to stay with us, but also I involved like the local community a lot too. And that was a big question that I would get a lot is why do you care? Like why the local people aren't staying with you? Why would you care? And it's like, but people come to see those people. And people ask those people like, oh, where should I stay? And the community of the hotel felt more than just, it needed to feel more than just the people staying because we needed to be connected to, you know, the ACT Theater and Fifth Avenue Theater and Pacific Place and all these things downtown that all of these people who visit or, you know, who are visiting and staying in the hotel would do. And so it was like we just surrounded ourselves with locals. We surrounded ourselves with people that were in the hospitality industry as locals. And we created this like fun space on the internet. So after a few months of doing this just for the Hotel Max, they asked me to run all of the hotel's social media. So that was a lot, but it was fun and I learned a lot. And I got to go to San Francisco and Tacoma and Portland and basically like hop around and like eat different food and take photos and post them and talk about all the different places that you could go to in each of these cities. And I always tried to do it from a lens of not the most popular thing, not the thing that's going to be on the list of the blog of like, what do I eat? Where do I eat in Seattle? I would try and do it from the perspective of, you know, if I was coming here and I wanted to know the like fun little spot, where would that be? Where would I go? And then from there, after doing lots of events, local events too, for again, creating that local community. We called them tweet ups at the time. I don't know if you remember that. I had been the social media manager for all the hotels for about a year at that point. And then I got an email from somebody who had attended the events and who had followed all of our hotels on Twitter and was active in participating in like some of the things that I would put out. And her name is Michelle Broderick. And I got an email from Michelle Broderick and she said, hey, Jen, I just started a new job. I am the general manager of the Seattle office for a little startup that is going to be launching in Seattle really soon. And I was wondering if you would be interested in talking about being the community manager. The startup is called Uber. And yeah, so we started the conversation. I loved working at Provenance. I loved the hotels. I loved the connection that I had made in the community with everybody, you know, visitors. And I'm still friends with some of the people that I connected with through Hotel Max Twitter. We're still friends like on the internet. So I had never worked at a startup. I had never worked in tech, but there was just this like feeling that I needed to try this, right? Like I had taken one Uber in San Francisco, a couple months before that. And it was like a really magical experience. I feel like everybody kind of forgets after it being so like norm now. That first time that you like get into an Uber, especially when it was it was just Black Car at the time. So it was just town cars. And you get in, you're like, this person found me. They found me. How did they find me? You get in and you're like in this like luxurious ride. There's water bottles in the back. You know, they ask if you want the heat a certain way or if you want the air conditioning on or if you want a song on or whatever. And then they drop you off and you get out and you're done. And that was like, I don't know. It blew my mind because taxis were hard to get in San Francisco and they were hard to get in Seattle. So I was like, okay, this is great because I feel like I can take what I know of building community and apply it here, because that was what the position was, community manager. So I started working at Uber, and this was like right after we had launched in Seattle. So Seattle, it was the third city of all of the cities of Uber. So this was back in 2011. And a lot of what I did within marketing was like throw shit at a wall and see what sticks. Because this was such a new thing, a new concept for people. And B, what we quickly learned was what worked for the New York community wasn't necessarily going to work for the Seattle community. And yeah, I guess from there, I worked in Uber for 5.5 years. I saw it grow from, like, just to be super honest, like a really fun, very, very, we worked a lot. We worked many hours. I mean, 60 to 80 hours a week, and did that for 5.5 years. And I saw it go from like this really fun startup where we could be so creative and have so much fun with marketing to, this place that was just so corporate. And it was like everyone that they were hiring had to have some sort of MBA and be from the top schools. And, the people who they hired in the beginning were the people who had like the passion of the community that they lived or where they were going to work. And there was just that change. And it was time. And I am, we've said this before, but I'm really thankful for that time. No matter what stories I tell, I will always be so grateful for a lot of what I learned. A lot of most of the people that I met, I'm still friends with, or at least acquaintances. And I still have a lot of the community as friends that I built when I worked at Uber. I mean, I know that, I met David back more at Hotel Max days, but I would say that, like, this is a perfect example of that, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Totally.
Yeah.
Connection.
It's all connection. And I think that the biggest part of that was the fact that I was always myself. I was always myself, no matter what. When we very first started in Seattle, there was a lack of trust, because it was like this very new thing. This wasn't like New York where people were like hailing town cars on the side of the street. So they're so used to riding in town cars. There was a lack of trust because it was an app. It was a new app. That wasn't something that was typical at the time. Like, there were apps, but it wasn't like a put your credit card in and get a service right away situation, And so I was always myself to a point where I found that it was easier to be on Twitter with my face, and it was Jen from Uber Seattle, because a lot of people would go there for customer support, and signing my name always to all of the customer support emails, because we did it all, anything that was rider facing. That's what community managers did. So if you received any sort of contact from Uber Seattle back in the day, that was all for me. But I always was myself. I led with, like we do here. I led with kindness and empathy, even to those people who got so mad at us for the fact that they left stuff in the Uber. I was always very kind. That's another whole story of how many weird things got left in the back of an Uber. Maybe that's another podcast. And then after Uber, it was I worked in fintech for a little bit, and then I worked at an agency. And a big part of where I learned everything was Uber. And I've really found that, like, learning while doing is the best thing for me. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you have
Cool.
any questions?
I love it. So many, actually, but I took some notes while you were talking, and we'll kind of weave that
Cool.
through. If not today, in future episodes. But you kind of touched on a couple things that I'll bring up kind of later in the episode. One of them being authenticity and the importance of that. But yeah, I'll kind of dive into sharing how I got into tech. So
Yeah. Let's hear your story.
yeah, and I'm prepped with all my drinks today. So
Yeah, I know.
I'm fully supplied.
This
Mm-hmm.
real cutie came from, it was a gift from one of the vendors at Barcelona Knits, Paloma.
I
I
love
had to
it.
use it
That's
today.
so cute. So in the last episode, I talked a little bit about, going to college for pre-med and, kind of at one point going, what am I doing? And transitioning to design and really pursuing creative venture. But, design inherently isn't tech. And so I was freelancing for a long time, and then I was part of an agency and I started my own design firm. It was like in 2008 was when I really kind of started that business, and I was such a newbie designer, and it's so funny to like think back to then, just like how far you've come, but like also just like how much you had to hustle to, and I think we experience this like in any part, whether tech or not, to be seen and to really like put yourself out there. And so, not inherently tech, but I was in design, and 2008, the crash happened, and all of these women whose partners had lost kind of everything in the crash, or like, their families had like suffered like a major hit. All these women were starting their own companies and businesses and things like that. And so somehow I found myself in this interesting little niche of creating branding and stuff like that for women that were starting businesses. And right around then was when Dribbble started. And if anyone's a designer, they know what Dribbble is. Very early design community. It's still around. But back in the day, you had to get like an invite only. And so I remember I had a friend, and there was only like a few hundred people on it at that time. And I got an invite, and I was like so excited. And so I got on, and the kind of premise of it was you would share little like snapshots or screenshots of things that you were, designing. And that really became a pretty strong community. Like we, in the early days, like if I can remember, I met a lot of friends locally in Seattle that way, like design friends, and we would do like little projects together for, when Japan experienced the earthquake, and then like we would do design projects around like designing typefaces and just lots of little interesting things. But fast forward like 2 or 3 years into this, we had just moved to Seattle proper. Like prior to that, we had kind of moved around Puget Sound, and I was busy working on branding and design and things like that. And I got an email, and it was just like one sentence, hello, I work for HTC and we're working on a special project. Like, would you be interested in coming in and talking about it? It was like one line. And it was this woman named Nicole. And shout out to Nicole. I've been feeling lately like I need to email her and like thank her for what she did, because even though she might not have realized it, it completely changed the trajectory of like my career and my life. She had come across my work on Dribbble and emailed me. And mind you, these were like super early days. Like this is prior to them having a job board or like anything like that. And so she emailed me this, and I thought it was a joke. iPhone had just come out, the first iPhone. But prior to that, HTC was like kind of the phone. And like I happened to have one. This was like the mobile race when HTC and Samsung were kind of like neck and neck, and HTC actually like kind of took off as like the leading Android phone. This is before Google had a phone. So it was like iPhone and HTC. And they brought me in, and I remember going into this office downtown Pioneer Square, and I walked in, and it was Nicole and just a bunch of men, a bunch of engineers. And I was like the only other woman. And they sat me down and they were like, hey, we're building a phone for women and we need a woman to design it. Can you work with us on this? And I was just like, yes, of course I can do it. Like, I didn't like question it at all because, you know, who was I to question like this big company? But also, I just couldn't believe I was where I was. Like, this office, it's hard. It's actually hard for me to put into words what the experience of working for HTC was like. It was so right in so many ways that it kind of set the bar for like where I was going to go work and the types of people that I wanted to work with in the future.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot not right with it. One being just, you know, I have a lot of friends still there, friends that I talk to like weekly, but or that used to work there with me, but that are men, but like there was no women, like very few women. And this is something I do want to dive deeper into like as we go on, but it's tough actually. And especially as you move into like leadership in companies, it's exceptionally tough. And you're often one of only or a few women at a table of decision makers and stakeholders that are men. And so anyways, I walk into this office and it's gorgeous. Like it's totally my style, like high design, like modern, simple, minimalist. And I just kind of right then was like, okay, I love it here. And there was like a long row of desks and it was, that's where all like the kind of product people sat. And then behind us were like these cool little pods and desks of engineers. And what this office was the innovation lab for me. They were growing and kind of had taken off in such a way that they needed kind of a US presence and office in the US or a design team in the US that really focused on kind of innovation and like what the future looked like, especially when targeting kind of a US, you know, market. And so I designed this phone. It was called Bliss. That was our code name. And it ended up being like something that like I was a bit embarrassed by, like when it launched, because it was like, you know, magenta and like whatever girl colors. The UI was different and it was pivotal in kind of changing the trajectory of what HTC's UI ended up becoming. And that's something that I'm really proud of. And only recently found out that I have several patents for it, but also won an award, design award for it, which is funny. I was like, yeah, I got like a Google alert one day and it was like, I don't know, from like 8 years ago. I won some design award I didn't know about. But regardless of that,
hold on.
Yeah.
Hold on. Did HTC just not tell you, or you had left and they didn't tell you? Like, what happened there?
Yeah. So, okay. So the TLDR version of this is when I came into HTC, the UI was very dated. It had never really changed. It was very bubbly and like very aged, like think very early iPhone, Android kind of style. And I came in and was like, let's get rid of this skeuomorphic, which means like lifelike, like trying to make it look real design. And let's actually create a better experience visually instead of trying to replicate something that's real. Like we don't need to make the clock look like a real clock. We actually need to make it look like a digital something experience that renders well on, you know, the displays that we had. And so I basically, like I do, and, you know, I caused a lot of trouble there. And I mean that in like a funny term, like it's actually what has gotten me many jobs like afterwards. But I ruffled a lot of feathers. I walked in and like I was like, you know what? This sucks. Like, we're going to redesign this whole thing. Like, not only this phone, but we're going to redesign like just the baseline, you know, OS layer. And so I ended up redesigning the HTC clock and kind of how icons looked and just how the UI presented and created like a whole new, you know, look and feel for what HTC UI looked like. And so that is what I won an award for. And I have a feeling what happened was someone that I worked with, because it was like a couple of us, like I was the art director. And so I kind of led that. And then I would do some of the design, but I worked with like a industrial designer and then a like true wireframe kind of user experience designer. We won the award together. So I have a feeling one of them submitted it for HTC or HTC submitted it. And yeah, and it's fun. It's cool. It was great to see that. But all that to say, it's funny to see HTC still like not a lot has changed like from those early days. Like this was
Mhm.
2000, about the same time, like 2010, 2011. But what I found, so I found this job, or this job found me through community, because I just had my design work like up there and I was just sharing with other designers, and then someone found it. And but it also was the community that I found within HTC. And some of my closest friendships, some people I stay in touch with, some I haven't, but came out of that kind of experience there. And that's how I found myself in like true tech. From there, I kind of at the tail end of my time at HTC, I found out I was pregnant with my first son, Coltrane. And at the time I was traveling a lot, like every 2 weeks to Taiwan. And I just realized like, I can't do this. Like it's burning me out very quickly. Also, being like the person that I am, and I'm in my like mid 20s at this point, like mid to like little past mid 20s.
Mhm.
You just kind of have all this energy and you just put it all in and you're not thinking about reserving any. And so I didn't, and I was burning out. And so I went to work, kind of contract work for different agencies after that, because I just didn't want to do it the way that I knew that it needed to be done. And there's some more stories there. Actually, I have a really funny story that I'll tell someday about the true reason why I quit that job was because of a single person, and that person happens to be one of my closest friends now. Shout out to Scott. We'll talk about you later. It's a funny story.
Hey, Scott.
Hey, Scott. All that to say is, I then, because of this community I had made, like these colleagues, like these friends, and this is something that everyone does. Like when they work with people, they become their friends there often in their community. And, you break bread
Mhm.
together and you travel together, and like you're in the grind together. And so sometimes they're the people that can
You
only kind of
experience trauma together.
understand you. Exactly. And they're the ones that can understand you the best. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, that's your community. And so because of that community, I went on to, one of my friends, Matt, at the time, reached out to me and was like, hey, do you want to come work for Beats? And I was like, yes. And so I ended up, right after my son was born, moving to San Francisco and working for Beats by Dre, which was, yeah, I mean, it was amazing. And very much a startup. So they were kind of spinning off a new part of Beats, which was Beats Music. And that's the part of Beats that I worked on. And so, which was building the streaming music service. And this was before Spotify was big. And so it was kind of, again, we were like neck and neck with Spotify early days. And we ended up getting bought out by Apple. And so I went to Apple. And I don't want to ruin any potential connection that I have with Apple in the future. But what I will say is,
Yeah, we're an app that's on those
yeah,
phones. Let's not.
yeah. Let's not do that. Is just
We
that
love you, Apple.
yeah, I didn't have that sense of community or belonging anymore. And for me, I always really needed that with a job that I had. Like I really needed to connect with the people that I was working with, or else for me, it just wasn't really worth it. Like if I didn't like the people I worked with, or it was a culture that was fostering things that like I just didn't really, connect with, then
It just wasn't the right place. And I think that happens a lot in acquisitions too. Like you kind of have this really unique thing and then you get acquired and you go and you end up like just not loving it. But I was there and I was actually planning to stay there. And then Scott emailed me one day and was like, hey, can you come lead product and design at the startup that I'm working at? And I laughed and was like, why would I come work for you when I left HGC because of you? But we ended up having like a really good, kind of connection after that. And yeah, so I went to go work for this startup called NextFit, and then we got acquired. And I decided during that time to take making to the next level. Yeah, I had started the podcast back when I was working at Apple. And then after that, when I went to work at the startup, was like, okay, I'm done with this being a side thing. Like, let's take this to the next level. But that's how I found myself in tech. And I love it. Like, I love it so much, but it has its challenges. And we mentioned this, I think, I don't know, in like your and I's episode earlier last year or the last one, that it is unique though. And we've come so far. Women in tech have come so far, and community in tech has come so far in the last 10 years, but not far enough.
I do want to touch on something really quick before we go into the next part.
Yeah.
I think it's very telling that we both left the places that we were at once they didn't feel like they did before.
Mm-hmm.
When I was 5.5 years in an Uber and I walked out the door for the last time, I didn't feel like there was any sort of emphasis on the local community. I didn't feel like there was any sort of emphasis on the people who were getting into the cars, and there wasn't an emphasis on the drivers. It was just grow as fast as you
Mm-hmm.
can. And I would bring up stuff that, not that we need to continue to do things the same way all the time, because I understand that that won't work either. But every time I would like bring stuff up in like team meetings or whatever, like, well, what about this? What about that had to do with community? It was kind of just brushed away. And I'm not saying that the people who led those meetings were bad people. I am still good friends with some of them, but they had the direction of growth at all cost. And
Yep.
so we lost a lot of the community feeling outside, like the community feeling that came from outside in, from the riders and drivers. But also I started feeling like I was losing my community within the office, because there was, it almost felt like there was this group of people who really cared about the drivers and riders. And then there's this group of people who were growth at all cost. And again, there's nothing wrong with that if that is who you want to be within that system. But that's just not who I am as a person. I can't be. I can't just be like numbers, 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 numbers. And that was like a big thing that like really kind of led to my exit. It was like almost like the empathy had to be sucked out of it for it to make sense anymore to everyone around me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't know. Based on like what you just said, I don't know if that's the exact way that it felt, but for you, but it kind of, once that space that felt so like community driven went away, that's when I was just like, I'm done,
Yeah.
This doesn't
Totally.
feel right anymore.
Yeah. I have a lot actually to say on this, and I think it is maybe worth another episode at some point, because
Yeah.
Here we are 10, however many years, 12, 13, 14 years out from kind of these early days, right?
What is time?
Yeah, what is time? And, we were young then too, and we had not experienced what it's like to be in a company that goes through growth. And so when you start with something and a company does what it's supposed to do, which is grow, whether it's a big corporate company like HTC was already, or if it's a startup like Uber was, and you go through any kind of growth or change, there's going to be turnover. It's not always going to fit for everyone. And there are people that are totally happy with just kind of like, going along or whatever. That's not bad. That's not wrong. But there are a subgroup of people that are like, you know what? I actually know that this isn't what I want, and I'm going to move on. And some of that might be naivety too. Like I hadn't been through growth yet, like in a company, and I knew what I wanted. And so when it reached these places, then I chose to go find my next thing that like had that essence that I was looking for, right? Now, what shifted for me though over like the last 13 years or whatever is that starting your own company, you see a whole different side of it. You also are forced to make decisions that if you make one decision kind of leads to how you make other decisions. And so we talked about this in the last episode that like how you fund your company or like how you decide to build your company kind of determines the trajectory of that growth and what you have to do. And so I think what you were just sharing really speaks to that and why we made certain decisions at Making, to bootstrap right now and to slow that growth or slow the demands of that growth so that we can do it in an authentic way as opposed to a way that just, again, puts profit over people and doesn't prioritize what we care most about. Again, like what's shifted though has been that growth is important. Like if you're not seeing growth, if you're not seeing change, like you're not actually going to stay alive. And so it's important to make progress. It's important to grow. But I think that there's a way to do it where we can adapt. And I think as we've matured in our careers, we can adapt and we do that. But it's not at the pace or in the way that, goes around kind of or goes outside of how we want this to shape and look and feel. And again, like I wouldn't hesitate to go work for another startup that's going to be on a fast, venture growth path because I now know what that looks like. And I can go into that and say, you know what, like this is how much I'm going to put of myself into it. This is my belief. Like this is how I can lend myself to that. And I want to help make it successful, but also know what it's going to feel like, look like, taste like. And it's their company. It's not mine. I don't really give a shit. The only thing I like deeply care about being mindful of those things is in what we're building. And so, I think this is a perfect segue to talk about how these early experiences really influenced careers that had a bent towards like consumer and community and ultimately making. Again, like I keep referencing the last episode, and if you haven't watched it yet, like go watch it because I think I don't really want to repeat all the same things, but I also think like
I'll link it in the show notes.
Yeah, cool. So, connection, like going back to connection, we have a unique opportunity as humans to seek connection with others and create space for it. And we're all looking for connection, whether we admit it or not, because what it does is it awakens something in us. It makes us feel like a sense of belonging when you're seen by another human in a unique way. And connection can be small. It can be a conversation on the street as you're walking your dog. It can be with a coworker and someone that you've kind of become friends with. It can be a community and like this group of people that are surrounded and connected based on similar interest or a passion for something. It can be within your family, and it can be with a partner, like someone who you love and you want to create connection with. But the connection and the power of community is something that early on in my career, and I know in your career, we picked up on as that is how you gather a group of people around something, like whether it's a product or, an endeavor. When I first started the podcast, it was all about giving people a platform to tell their stories. That's creating connection between two people that aren't necessarily even having a conversation, but they're listening. And then as we started making app, what I realized that was missing from competitors and other people in this space was community. And not only is it like our moat, which is the thing that kind of sets you apart and differentiates you from others, but it is the thing that also makes us very, very special. And so being a part of Dribbble, being a part of these unique tech companies that we had kind of created community within, being a part of Beats, which music is just like this exceptionally vibrant community in and of itself, but then also within that company, and then so on. It was clear to me that making needed to have and be built on connection and community, and not like we're defining what community is and this community is a part of it, but actually creating the platform that people can make those connections and people can create community. And where it all came together for me was understanding that is where people are going to find the value, which is going to help them create opportunity for themselves and for others. And so pairing that with our marketplace, which is the opportunity, and then the community, which is the social part of making app, that's how those two marry together. And I just don't think, for me, I could do strictly one or the other. Like I think that there's the beauty of community is that it can create impact and opportunity. And the beauty of opportunity is that it's really best fueled by community. And so for me, that's where this whole journey and story has led to, is seeing the value in that and emphasizing that in what we do.
I love it. That's why we're here. I think that there was a lot of that when I was in the very, very early days of Uber, especially in Seattle, where, I had mentioned in New York, that was like a black car culture where you would flag down an SUV or a town car that's, basically treating it kind of like a taxi. And that wasn't in Seattle. And so we created extra opportunity for this group of people who were hustling so hard to make money. They would, it's funny because some of the people who I connected with at Uber, some of the drivers I had known from Hotel Max, because they would come into the front desk and like give their card, which was really awesome. But at that time, a lot of these people were like blown away by this extra opportunity that came to them. People were requesting them just driving around. It wasn't this like we have to go to these hotels or we have to try and be visible at a convention so that people can get around. We have to figure out how to get people to book us at the airport to and from, etc. It was literally somebody opened an app and pushed a button and they were receiving more opportunity for themselves and their family. And we became like good friends with a lot of these people. I mean, I knew about their kids and I knew about, their families. It was like this extra layer. It wasn't just the riders that you would think the community was at Uber. It was the drivers as well. And that I feel like really kind of links to what we're looking to do at Making, and is what we did early on for the drivers, that were on the platform at Uber, is create this opportunity through, a community-based system. So yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I
Totally.
still follow, I'm still Facebook friends with some of these people too. Not that I use Facebook a lot.
I don't think I've logged into Facebook in like many, many years. We do
Yeah.
have it making Facebook, which I'm not sure why we have that. But anyways,
A placeholder.
so yeah.
Yeah.
A couple of things, and then we should get into the questions that people asked.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we've kind of keyed in on here is how when things start to grow or scale, how you maintain community or how you don't lose that kind of magic from what kind of, created this experience. And
Mhm.
I mean, the first thing I'll say is it's an experiment. I don't think many companies do this. I have not seen it done well. But I have seen it done well with companies that are doing it the way that we're doing it. Now, that doesn't mean that making's going to be perfect or, it's going to turn out exactly how I want it. It likely will look a little bit differently. But one of the things that we can, outside of just fundamentally like how we fund and how we kind of structure the company and move forward, one of the things that you can do is the culture that you're trying to foster within the company is work to foster that culture outside of the company, like outside of the team, but like within the actual like user base. And so
Mhm.
early on, we did a lot of things around that. It's shifted and changed a little bit. We're doing a lot more events. We have another event we should talk about at the end that's coming up. But it's about fostering that culture within your user base too. And so I always like to use an example of like atomic networks, which I kind of won't really get into what that means. You can Google it and kind of surmise what that means. But basically, if we empower all these early users and they understand the culture, just like early members of a founding team within a company, if you embed that culture and foster that, then each of those people, like as the company grows, exemplifies that to new people that are coming on. And there's ways that you want to keep accountability there so that like it doesn't go off the rails. But within making, we have this opportunity to foster a particular culture, and we already have. And it's been amazing to see kind of the impact and results from that, like within users on the app. But if you foster that, then as more people come on, there's this, group of people that then kind of become their own nucleus with all of the other people that they're connected with that kind of exemplifies this culture.
Would you say if you foster it, they will come? Sorry, I'll cut that out.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I said early on a lot was like, you're not going to be for everyone. Like, you can't be everything for everyone. And so
Mhm.
we are exactly who we are and what we believe that we're supposed to do in the world. And the people that value it just like we do, and the people that desire something different, they will come. And that leads me to my next thing, which is authenticity, which will be a perfect thing to talk about in one of these questions that someone asked us. And yeah, so let's go into the questions. So Jen and I are going to do these episodes regularly. And if you have a question about being a person in tech, being a woman in tech, building community, fostering community, crafting, building a business in the craft or maker space, like whatever question that you have that you want to ask, feel free to email us at hq@makingco.com or ask
Mhm.
us,
And
DM
it can
us.
connect to the Making app or it doesn't have to. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
totally. Yeah, just ask away. So let's go into the questions.
What marketing strategy do you recommend for small business that wants to spend less time on social media? My whole marketing career started around social media, right? And so there are definitely times where I'm just like, why is this a thing still? And then the universe quickly reminds me through some amazing thing happening or a connection or meeting somebody in real life that follows me. And I don't know, there's just always something that the universe like brings around. But I think the biggest thing for people who are running small businesses and it is solo you and that's it, or you have a really, really small team, is you have to protect your energy and do what makes you happy. And I understand that you might be like screaming at the computer right now, like, but Jen, that means not doing social media. And I understand that. And I get it. But there are ways of thinking of it or planning ahead of time that kind of help protect that energy, even if you're not wanting to do social media or wanting to be on it a lot. So I think the first thing is like, what makes you happy? What makes you happy when you're creating content? And is that hopping on really quick and talking into the camera for a second about something that you're doing? Or is it taking photos? What makes you happy, right? And start there. Also, there's no time to waste. Don't try and do everything. You really want to, again, protect your energy, find the things that work, right? Where are the people that you want to bring into or want to see what your business is doing? Now, I'm going to actually use this person as an example because I feel like that's easier than me just talking in these like, generalizations. So this was actually Andrea, who, if you go back one podcast, that is who asked the question, which love you, Andrea. You're amazing. Okay. So I think that taking her business example, so she has a couple of different like levels of her business, right? Like she is a chef for local people in Tahoe, but she also has this thing called the Potato Dumpling Society. You want to be able to create content that funnels people to where you are most happy, right? Which is writing your newsletters, which is updating the Potato Dumpling Society, which is creating that content. So what you want to do is, first of all, figure out where your people are. You don't have to do everything. Pick one. Pick one. Once you've done that, look at what you have been doing and what people are reacting to the most. So for Andrea, I'm going to just assume it's something like photos of a beautiful dinner party. And when you hop on and give a little 5-minute spiel and talking on reels and giving people like some tips, because I do love when you do that. And so I'm just going to assume that everybody else does. So like find 1 to 2 content themes that work for what people are already reacting to. And then just like bake that in. That was an accident, but it worked really well with what we're talking about since you are a chef. Bake that in to what you do every day, right? So like, for example, if people love photos of the dinner parties, every time you do a dinner party, take photos of like the table, the backdrop, like everything that you've set up. Take photos of the food that you're making. Just say, okay, every single time that I am hired as a chef to do this, I'm going to take 5 to 10 photos, bank them, put them in a folder, and, you'll have a ton of content to spread out, and you won't have to sit down and create that right away. The other part of you talking, for example, with the Potato Dumpling Society, maybe it's like a little sneak peek into your planning of the menu for the next time. Or, again, things that you're already doing, you can create content around that. And I think that there is this big idea of, I have to create this giant calendar with all of these different types of things. But really what you want to do is just simplify everything, right? 1 platform to 2 platforms, the things that are already working for your audience and that are bringing people in, and bake that into what you're already doing every day. And then you can just start putting that out and seeing how it goes. The other part of this is like, that might change. You might be like, I love doing TikTok dances and that's what I want to do now. And then that's fine. You just figure out how that works within what you're doing. But again, the goal is to get people to go to wherever you are enjoying things the most, which for Andrea is writing her, newsletters and her blog posts about food and like what she's cooking, and then leading people into the Potato Dumpling Society. So I know that was a really long answer, but again, It's about simplifying and figuring out what you like doing the most and like adding that into your plan.
The newsletters are my favorite too. Like writing emails are my favorite part of marketing. You own that channel, which is so important. And social media, you don't own, which is why it's so taxing, because you have to keep up with the algorithms and you have to keep up with like what everyone else is doing. And emails is where you get to express yourself, and your newsletter is where you get to express yourself most authentically, right? And so ultimately, this brings back to something that we'll be talking a lot more about in the future, which is storytelling. And so taking everything Jen just said and really driving and trying to drive whatever efforts are outside of your email newsletter to driving people to your email newsletter, so that instead of just, sending them to a link or whatever, drive them to signing up for your newsletter, because that's where you're going to get the most engaged audience with long term, because you own that channel. And that speaks from experience here at Making. Like, we always emphasized our emails, and it's really paid off, I will say, over time. So I love that question.
It is a lot though. And that is why we're making, building Making, right? Like we're making for this reason, because social media can be so overwhelming. And with your small business being a part of Making and being a part of the marketplace, it's so much more of the community is lifting people up. Every time somebody's going to tag you in a post, it'll directly link to your shop. And so, I mean, I think that's, we're trying to take the pieces of social media that are wonderful, AKA community and connection, and bring them into this beautiful space for makers.
I got a great question on the Making app, and I read it and I was like, oh, this is perfect because this is me. So the question is, talk to me about networking in tech as an introvert who would prefer to be sitting on her couch knitting. And then what are some ways I can strengthen my network while still feeling genuine in those relationships and true to who I am? And this is perfect because authenticity is key. And if you are authentic to who you are at multiple levels, then this becomes a whole lot easier. Trying to keep up with the Joneses and what everyone else is doing takes you out of alignment of who you are and becomes a huge energy suck. You're not protecting your energy, and you're also not being authentic to who you are. So like, it's not translating to other people in the right way. This is my approach to everything, including product. But I think the first thing that you have to think about is, what is your goal? Like, if you look at networking or connecting with other people in either business or craft, you have to think about, what is your goal here? Like, is your goal to create connections so you have more job opportunities? Is your goal to make friends? Is your goal to not feel alone? Like, what is your goal? And then think about what your purpose is too. And this is could be a much bigger conversation. And I think something that we'll explore over time. But when I say purpose, I do mean your purpose, like as a person. And not everyone knows that, but everyone is working towards it to some degree. And I think as we go through our careers, even early on in our careers or friendships or life, we start to understand a little bit of the magic of who we are and what it is that's unique that we bring to this planet and what we bring to connections with other people. And so, when I say purpose, it's like, okay, you have your goal of what you're looking for, but what is your purpose? Is your purpose do you feel called to make other people feel loved? Do you feel called to be an activist? Do you feel called, and do you feel like your purpose in life is to bring warmth through the things that you create? Like, I'm generalizing here because I think purposes can be really honed in, but it can also be very general. You can have multiple things that you do in your life, but purpose is a big thing that you should think about. And then you marry those two together and you go, okay, so my goal is to create connection with other people in tech. So as a woman in tech, I don't feel alone. And then my purpose is that I can bring to those connections this unique ability to storytell, or this unique ability to make other people feel loved, or to create incredible dishes of food that, makes people feel warm and fuzzy. Like there's all these really kind of interesting aspects that when you start thinking about then what you can bring to that connection, you go into them and you kind of have this North Star of what you're doing. And it also narrows down what you're trying to do. And so much like what Jen was talking about, you don't try and hit up all the events. You don't try and hit up all the groups. You don't try and make all the groups. You don't try and meet with all the people. You start to, through these two things, goal and purpose, you actually start to think about and hone in on like where you actually spend your time. And so as an introvert, and I understand this because I am an introvert, you align with your goal. And so if you love sitting and knitting on your couch, but you feel like you want some friends or you feel like you need more job opportunities, center what you're seeking out based on that. And then in those, bring to those conversations, and it does require you to put yourself out there. Any sort of connection does, but then bring your purpose into that. And often you will find very quickly people who are excited to talk about that very thing because they too feel some kind of connection with that purpose, or they're just completely, they find you fascinating and they want to talk to you and like kind of dive deeper into that. And so, that's a long way of saying being authentic to who you are. And we talked about that a few minutes ago. Jen was mentioning authenticity earlier on and kind of talking about tech, about being who she is. And I truly believe that if we just took a step back and understood how important it is to love and to be who we are, and that it doesn't really matter what other people think, we would feel a lot less alone because there's a lot of other people that are feeling the same way that we are.
You will find the people that you're meant to talk to if you do lead with authenticity. I mean, that's kind of what you just said, but like going into these, going into events where you don't know somebody and you're just like, okay, I'm just trying to like be a part of this space. Lead with the fact that that you knit. Bring it with you. Walk around with it. Like there are going to be other people who are interested in that, or they want to talk to you about it. They want to learn. They do, right? And that part of us as makers is such a big part. We put so much love and heart into this thing that it's a really good way to bring people in, even if they don't, because people will want to talk to you. So I don't know, maybe that's like kind of a security blanket too. Is like, okay, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. I'm going to bring my knitting. It's going to be something that's stockinette. Something super easy. I'm going to wear the right bag so I can just put my ball of yarn in, and I'm just going to walk around and like introduce myself and knit. See what happens.
Any sort of connection requires you to put yourself out there. Yes, sometimes serendipitously, like you'll be walking and someone will approach you, but they put themselves out there to approach you. And so connection requires one or both people to reach out. And it is a scary thing to do, like depending on what the cost is, whether you're looking for a job and kind of like putting yourself out there, or if you're looking to connect with people around like a group or a similar interest, like kind of having to like put yourself out there can be kind of nerve-wracking, but doing that and being brave, ultimately, it almost does signal to the universe that like you're open to receive. And that's kind of a big thought to bring to this, but it actually ties back to kind of my early opportunity with Dribble and HTC, which was I wasn't actually putting my work out there thinking that I was going to get a job. I was just sharing in community, which is a really like nerve-wracking thing to do, is to put your work out there because it can be judged just like words and thoughts can be judged. But that is what created opportunity in the future. And so, yeah, don't be afraid to put yourself out there, and haters are going to hate like in any shape or form, even if it's just yourself to you. And that was going to be my last thing was so many times I
Ooh.
leave social situations or conversations and I go, what did I just say? How did I just come across? And you go into a spiral of like judging and assessing yourself, and like, just don't do that. Don't do that. Like, part of being authentic to yourself is letting it go. And if you can just stop that frame of mind, you showed up as you. You were vulnerable. Like, you put yourself out there. Like, be proud of yourself for that. I know that's not an easy thing to do. I speak from experience, but like, as soon as that little voice starts coming up, just tell it to fuck off, you know, like, and just keep going. So,
Yeah. There was somebody who came up to me at Sacred Sheep, and they said that there was actually a couple people who came up to me at Sacred Sheep, and they said that they had been wandering around and they hadn't talked to anyone yet. And they were really nervous to like talk to somebody, but they wanted to connect. Right. And whether it was me or somebody sitting outside knitting or a different vendor, like they just wanted something. And I think one of them had listened to the podcast before or seen like some of our social posts. And the other person I had just said hi to as they walked in. And the fact that they just came up and said like, hey, you know, after us having a conversation for a little bit, they were like, I was really scared to like talk to anybody. And thank you for being a safe person for me. The more that you put yourself out there and have those good experiences, I feel like the more that you can be that for somebody else too. Because I've always been a very extroverted introvert where I need to have my space. I need to recharge. I need to be alone for a little while, but I will always talk to people. And I find more and more that the more open that I am to talk to people, because, you know, as an extroverted introvert, yeah, I'll talk to everybody, but like at a certain point, I do want to crawl back into my shell. And I'm a Cancer. So it's like, I want to crawl back into my shell and be home and like cozy and not, you know, around a million people. But the more that I put myself out there, the more that I share, the more that I talk to people I don't know, the more that I feel like people have a safe space wherever I am. And that means within making and whoever is with me at an event, that's the safe space. And then those people they have that example, right? And they, even if it's scary and it takes them 5-10 years to feel comfortable enough to be that safe space, they then also become that for somebody else. To the opposite side of that, if you are an extrovert and you feel comfortable talking to lots of people, put that out into the universe that you're a safe space, because that will help somebody else so much that just wants to feel that connection, but is so scared to take that first step.
So you are fresh off the plane from Barcelona and you had an amazing time. Do you want to just share like, oh God, here we go. Do you want to share like your 1 minute recap and like tell people where they can go find more about it?
If you have ever thought about going to Barcelona Knits, I say that I'm gonna keep saying this until we're there next year and I see all of you there. You need to go to Barcelona Knits. So we had 2 full days, talked to many vendors, heard so many amazing stories, some that you will hear through our vendor meet and greets, some that will be coming soon as we continue partnerships after the event, these relationships that we created while we were there. So make sure you subscribe to our YouTube. And everybody that I talked to, you're also wonderful. Thank you. Go to Barcelona Knits next year. And yeah, we have another event coming up, which I need to sleep a lot before we do this event. Yeah. But Ashley, do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
So we will be in New York in January for Vogue Knitting Live. And I'm excited. It's going to be fun. We'll share a lot more details on that over the next few weeks. But we also have, and it's getting dark here, I'm realizing. So it's like all of a sudden, like
I know. I was like, do I need a ring light?
Yeah. And I will be speaking on a panel there with Amy from Being a Me and a couple other people, which I won't announce because it's not mine to announce. But I'm excited. So come see us in New York or start planning your trips for New York. You can go to Vogue Knitting Live to find out the exact dates. It's end of January, but we will be there and we will be sharing all of the making love there.
And I'm excited because a bunch of the people that I met at Barcelona Knits, a lot of them are going to also be at Vogue Knitting Live. So we can all hang out again. Yay.
Quick reminder that making at Marketplace, being able to sell finished goods is coming. In fact, it's all we're really working on right now. I'm really excited to launch that. We'll be kind of sending out updates here and there. We got some testing to do, but yeah, it's coming and it's amazing. I have to really quickly say that we found another engineer at the last event that we went to, which was Sacred Sheep. And so we've now found one engineer at Flock that came and met us, and then we found another engineer at Sacred Sheep, and talk about the power of connection.
I know. If I met you at Barcelona Knits and you're an engineer that wants to come work at Making, please reach out because we're just going to collect them as we go. If you're going to Vogue Knitting Live and you're an engineer that wants to work at Making, come talk to us.
We should close out with a moment of gratitude and say what we're thankful for.
Yes.
So mine's pretty easy. It is now frigid where I live. I went on a frigid walk today, but the sun was shining. For many years, I lived in Seattle, which is not that sunny. And then I also then I went to San Francisco, which is also not that sunny, but, has more sun. And then I lived in like the north, and it was very cold and not sunny. And now I live in Boise, and and I was told this when we first moved here, like it is the sunniest winters, and it's so true. This is third winter here, and today I went on this walk, and the sun was shining, and I am just so thankful for the sun. Like it's such a basic thing, and it's kind of funny to say it, but as I was just walking and I could feel the sun on me, like any anxiety or stress or whatever it was just kind of washes away, and I just soak up the sun, and I'm just like so grateful for where I live and feeling the sunshine.
Yay.
Oh, Seattle.
We've had sun here. It's going down quickly though, as you can tell as we've been chatting. It's like getting darker and darker. Soon, Ashley, if we don't get off this call, we're just going to be sitting in the dark, and that will be creepy. So I will go on to my moment of gratitude. I can't say it enough. I'm just grateful for every single person that I talked to at Barcelona Knits, that came up to me and asked for a photo, that the people who very kindly asked us to do the Macarena with them at the Saturday drag show / dinner. All of the new fiber friends that I met, all of the people who dye yarn and designers and everyone. You are all so wonderful, and I'm so grateful for all of you. And I'm excited to see some of you at Vogue Knitting Live, and I'm excited to see some of you next year at Barcelona Knits. And hopefully I'm excited to see all of you at some point in the Making app. So there we go.
There we go. And I'm descending into darkness. The sun is going away.
I know.
So
And as we descend into darkness, we shall end this podcast episode. Thank you for watching. If people have questions, again, you can email us or put them in the chat if you're watching this live with us, or put it in a comment below and we'll get back to you.
Yeah, please do. Like, we love answering questions, and the questions that we got
We
today
love
were
questions.
fantastic.
Yeah. Cool. All right.